Good afternoon and welcome to the Carnegie Mellon Women's Association Fall Event, Adjusting to Our New Reality and Leading Through Change. My name is Shirley and I am the President of the Women's Association. Thank you all for joining us today. We have an outstanding program prepared for you featuring 3 CMU women leaders. Today's event will include a 1-hour panel discussion followed by a networking session at 5 p.m. We have received a number of terrific pre-submitted questions that we'll start with, and then we'll open up the chat for live Q&A. So keep those questions coming as we have our discussion and just throw them in the chat so we can tackle them during the live session. Before we begin, I would like to note that this year marks the 105th year of the Women's Association. We were first established in 1916 by wives of engineering faculty. Since then, we've grown to include women from across the university, including faculty, trustees, staff, and university partners and friends. As of last year, our membership had reached over 250 members. Our goal is to engage our members in the campus community and to support outstanding graduating students. We do so through a scholarship program. 100% of the membership contributions go towards our scholarships, which we award in the spring of each year to 7 outstanding graduating female students. And I'd like to take this moment to thank our members for their support and generosity. Now it is my pleasure to introduce CMWA Honorary President Tris Jahanian. We are so grateful for your involvement in our organization, Tris, and we thank you for your support. I will hand it over to Tris now for a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I am pleased to welcome you today to the virtual panel discussion, which is taking the place of our annual fall membership gathering. While I wish we could hold this event in person, it's going to be a great session, and we've lined up 3 distinguished leaders. I want to extend a particularly special welcome to any new attendees joining us this afternoon. It's wonderful that so many members of the CMU community are here with us today. These events are a chance for us all to come together to network and have an engaging dialogue. As just shared, CMWA continues to enrich this university through its many activities. I'd like to highlight the CMWA scholarships that we award to CMU students also. While CMU is committed to attracting outstanding and diverse students, we're equally focused on giving them the tools they need to succeed once they get here. Last year, we were proud to present 7 exceptional students, each with a scholarship of $1,500. Those students represented all schools and colleges at CMU, a testament to our diverse learning culture. I personally want to thank all of you who were part of this rich tradition. Our robust membership and ability to provide those scholarships is a direct product of the great leadership exhibited by the CMWA board. So thank you to our board members. And my notes. As Jess said, the CMWA is in its 105th year now, and I know I'm repeating some of what Jess said. And in our last membership year, we had 265 members, 43% of which were new members, and we hope to continue to grow. While the mission of CMWA is to support the advancement of women at Carnegie Mellon, participation is open to anyone who's associated with the university, including faculty, staff, spouses, partners, and friends. I look forward to another successful year of furthering our mission and creating valuable connections among our community. Let's continue to support and encourage one another. In the pursuit of this work, that is what this association is all about. Thank you again for being here with us virtually today. I hope you will join me for the networking event following today's panel discussion. And Jess will now introduce our panelists for today's program. Jess.
Thank you, Tris. Now I would love to invite my panelists to join me on camera one by one as I introduce you before we dive into our discussion. Our panelists today are Ayana Ledford, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Heinz College and Dietrich College, and Executive Director of Progress, the Program for Research and Outreach on Gender Equity in Society. She is an expert in developing innovative strategies to promote equal opportunity and specializes in influencing women's long-term career success with a particular focus on women of color. Melanie Lucht, Associate Vice President and Chief Risk Officer of Enterprise Risk Management. Melanie oversees the development and deployment of risk management tools and practices across CMU. She leads a cross-functional group to provide risk intelligence to university leadership and to inform strategic decision-making. And Rebecca Nugent, the Stephen E. and Joyce Fienberg Professor of Statistics and Data Science and Associate Department Head of Statistics and Data Science. Rebecca is the founding director of her department's corporate capstone program, and she has helped to improve diversity and inclusion in her field by launching, among many initiatives, the Women in Data Science Conference in Pittsburgh. Welcome, panelists. Let's get started with our first question. So we all know that things have changed this year. It's been called a lot of things: our new normal, the new now, the new reality, hence our panel name. I'd love to start off by looking at the bright side, and I'm curious, what do you see as some of the positive outcomes or opportunities from the new reality that we are in? Ayana, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to join this panel. To go first, what shall my answer be? I think that it's more, I feel like people are more present. They're more aware and informed, and we're talking about the positives, right? So, and I also think that there are more resources in terms that people are now hosting all these seminars and exchanging information that, although granted there's accessibility issues in terms of technology, it is reaching a larger group, a larger audience. So I would say, in a weird sense, although we're disconnected in person, we have more opportunities, depending on your access to technology, to be connected via the tools that we have at our disposal. So I think it's exciting that at least people seem to be much more engaged and hyper aware.
I think you put that really well. It's almost like we're being forced to be more engaged because we have these roadblocks, and there are definitely new ways that we can connect. And I know, if there's this panel is virtual, we might have folks who might not have been able to attend in person, but are able to join us online. So I think that's great. Anyone else want to hop in and comment on a positive opportunity you see?
Sure, I would be happy to just build upon the great comments that Ayana made. I think one of the things that we have learned through this, because this certainly has been an opportunity for learning, as many opportunities are, but in risk management, we look at the positives as well as the negatives, the more opportunistic sides of things. And one of the things that we have seen is just the inspiration for more creativity, and what kind of art or what kind of innovations we will gain from this experience will really help to drive the future in a way that we may not have anticipated 8 or 9 months ago. And so while this has been a very challenging experience, to say the least, I think necessity is the mother of invention, and we have been able to create new opportunities as a result, not just for higher education, but for the world at large. And so this has the silver lining to be also some very exciting times as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just add to that. We are seeing quite a bit of diversity in terms of geographical location in all of our virtual events. So just to echo what Ayana was saying, our Women in Data Science events have gone from being kind of this local Carnegie Mellon Pittsburgh feel to getting people from all over the country. So that's a real win. But I really like what Melanie was talking about in terms of being creative. So what I have seen happening quite a bit in the last 8 to 9 months is that when there is a crisis, and this goes beyond just being a global pandemic, right? When there is a crisis, that's really an opportunity for people to step into positions of leadership or to come up with solutions that didn't exist before. And you don't really have a choice but to move forward with some action, because otherwise you'll just be, the paralysis of inaction is worse. So for example, people are looking for leadership. They are looking for people to step forward and come up with new ideas and new ways of doing things. And I think that that can lead, just given our theme of our panel, that can lead to leadership opportunities and people taking on new roles that they didn't expect to take on prior to some kind of crisis. So it's a real opportunity for people to redefine themselves and to step forward and say, I'm willing to take on this responsibility. I have an idea, and people will listen because we need solutions. So that's definitely what I found within the last couple of years for myself and also for colleagues around me. It supports taking initiative, right? This is an opportunity to take initiative and redefine your own role.
Yeah, thank you for especially the first part when you mentioned the idea of a more widespread community involvement. I think Carnegie Mellon, we are a global campus community, and sometimes that feels very narrow, just Pittsburgh. So I think this definitely is reminders that we have campuses in Silicon Valley, in Africa, all across the globe. And it's really nice to be able to tap into that. And kind of going along the lines of that idea about this being a time to redefine or look for new, opportunities to kind of push ourselves. I do want to acknowledge that it is a difficult time at the same time. So I'm curious what your advice might be for, even when we're facing exciting new opportunities, like how do you stay focused and motivated and inspired despite periods of challenge? And maybe I'll throw that back to Rebecca, just building off of what you ended with, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. We'll just have that hard one. How do we stay motivated and inspired? So, you know what? Like, we can be, let's be honest on Zoom right now. Zoom can be very exhausting. Being remote and trying to put in that extra energy to stay connected to your community can be very tiring. Creativity is, the need to be creative all the time can be very draining. So I want to acknowledge that to anybody who is feeling like that, who is listening to this panel. I also feel like that. I am with you, and I understand that. But I found that some things have actually ended up being more fun, and that sounds really odd. And I'll throw out an example. So our virtual graduation / commencement ceremony from last May, we had to kind of turn on a dime and just absolutely completely rethink how we were going to do something that was a pretty comfortable tradition and how we used to do it. So this of course was really stressful, but once we got over being like, oh God, what are we going to do? We found ourselves pretty motivated and inspired to kind of just do things that we never even thought we would ever get a chance to do. And so one of the things we had our faculty do is create different videos that we then put together into a big, large department video that we played and things. And I know that sounds like such a small thing, but what we got back from the department was creative things, funny things, people being themselves, like it being much more honest, and like people seemed actually happier because we were doing something new and we were doing something exciting. And I think if we can set that frame of mind when we're trying to tackle these challenges, that was actually kind of one of the fun parts about having to totally rethink things, is being motivated by the opportunity to see other sides of people, to look at things in a different way. And so that's kind of how we were getting through some of the challenges that we were facing last spring, for example.
And I would just add to that, I think what has been inspiring to me has I feel like I should be in the audience actually, because I think that there are so many of us that are working so hard and doing so with many challenges that, whether there's family challenges, whether there's health challenges, and we all have those challenges that we manage and do so with grace and with professionalism, and still do the work that we do every day. And so I think one of the things that I find to be inspiring and as well as motivating is just how we're able to continue to do this at such the level of commitment and dedication with everything else that's going on at the same time. It really just gives you an opportunity to be grateful, to be around so many people that are so inspiring and hardworking, but also it then motivates you to do the same thing, if not try to strive further. So.
And I just want to bookend this. I was thinking about, motivation and inspiration, right? And how do you say motivate? And it's kind of like, oh, you're Zoom exhausted. There's so many things to manage. These are crazy times. And I think one of the things I like to share is like thinking about really what do you get joy out of doing, right? And then say no to the things that don't provide you that joy, or at least allow you to get to the next level in your career, right? Because you're trying to balance so many things, being okay with stepping back and saying no due to you don't have to do it all, right? So trying to curate those items or those tasks or those opportunities that excite you, and think about why it excites you, and then try to develop a plan in which your work, your style, your volunteerism all lead and are really and center on those areas, and promote you and reaching your goals as a leader, and sharing that motivation with your team, and letting them know that it's also okay to say no and trying to do everything. Because the time that we're in, I'm always saying when I enter Zooms that definitely give yourself that grace. It's okay if your camera's off, if it's on, you might have visitors coming to visit you. Be okay with that and comfortable with that, but also be okay with the understanding that being in these different spaces, you might have to step away. And it doesn't mean that you're less ambitious. It might be you're just being smart with your time. So don't try to stretch yourself too thin.
If I can I think that's so smart what Ayana's saying. And I think that saying no to some things also then allows you to say yes to different kinds of opportunities and different things that do bring you that joy that she's referencing, right? So if you've been stuck working on something that's not bringing you joy, but you see an opportunity or something that you can develop or bring a new idea, saying no to some other things will let you jump into that yes moment, that when you are in this crisis time and people are looking for leadership, and again, outside of the pandemic, just any time you're facing challenges or difficulties, that does give you the opportunity to give yourself some yes energy into something new. So I don't think of it as like, I'm just saying no, I'm terrible. Think of it as a choice. You're saying no specifically to allow you to say yes to some other opportunity, right? To some other door, to some other idea, to some other, you think about a leadership rung, some new challenge. I think that's a really great thing to do during a crisis opportunity. Yeah, and then yeah, of course you can keep your cameras off, then nobody sees you drinking wine on the side. You do what you got to do. No judging.
I love that concept of what sparks joy to decide, sort of prioritize what we do. And I liked that yes energy, Rebecca, how you kind of put that, because that does kind of infuse some excitement into when you are prioritizing. And this is something that you both touched on, but I wanted to just revisit it, the idea that, some of us are still working remotely, others are in an interesting hybrid where part of your week is at home or in the office. I'm just curious, like your take deeper into that idea of work-life balance and like what your thoughts are and maybe practices that have worked for you in creating boundaries and maintaining work-life balance despite, our work being in our home in many cases. Anyone feeling like they want to jump in there?
I think that kind of assumes that we have practices that are working. So let's just start.
Or something you want to try but hasn't succeeded yet, right?
So I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. She's turning 8, so 5 and almost 8, kindergarten and 2nd grade. And when they were both at home in the spring and over the summer, it was very challenging. My husband also works from home. And so we were doing a lot of going back and forth, splitting things. And to be just completely honest, he took the biggest hit in the spring because his schedule was more flexible than mine was. So thank you to him, to having a partner who was helping out there. And now they're back at, they're actually in person in school right now, but we're waiting for that phone call every day that they're going to be sent home. But so I think the routines and the management of expectations has been really good. Like just letting go that, sometimes you're going to order pizza and that is fine. And sometimes it's movie night and that's okay too. And everybody, maybe you're going to not do laundry for a bit and everyone will live. But I think also sort of being, to Ayana's point, like kind of giving yourself some grace, I think is what I'm seeing a lot of people manage. And this is for men and women. This is just work-life balance in general. Having open conversations with my kids has helped about what the situation is and why mom's on a Zoom meeting at 9 p.m. because she's trying to talk to some students in China. They come in and say hi. Do you know what I mean? But like being honest, I think has helped a lot in our house. It doesn't mean it's not incredibly hard, but Melanie, Ayana?
Oh, go ahead.
I share your sentiments. I mean, I have young ones at home and they're still home. One's on a hybrid and one is, has a runny nose, so can't attend daycare at times. But, I think for me is that I think about what do I be doing in the office now that I'm at home? And I think in the beginning, I felt the need to overcompensate, and because I'm home and I want to make sure, and I don't know, no one was checking on me. In my mind, it was all internalized, trying to prove myself to myself because no one was checking on me, but you internalize this sense of trying to be, the perfect employee, right? And so stepping back and saying, cutting off time, saying, if I spent this many hours, what would that look like if I was in the office? What would that look like pre these new times? And saying, I would leave room for family, for friends. And that actually benefits the workspace because I'm energized, right? Personally, I like to run. So I'm a big runner. So, that self-care, I hate, when I say, I'm like, oh, that's so fluffy, that's self-care, but it's true, you do need it. You need to find those outlets. But also, if you have a partner at home, balancing into that, being okay to ask for help. If you don't have a partner at home, if you're taking care of older ones, if you need help with shopping, I think this network here that, I believe that it's a bunch of individuals who will be happy to help out. Be okay with just asking for help. So I think recognizing that when you have that struggle, it is real and it's okay to have that struggle. Balance ebbs and flows. One week you might have the perfect schedule and you're like, this is the week. The next week it can completely be derailed and you ask for that help. Because people will be willing to help that. So don't think that you have to manage on your own. And that help can come in the form of colleagues, your supervisor, other leaders that you network with. So please try to do so if you can.
Yeah, and I in agreement with all of that. I think the only other thing I would add is, work with a work-life balance. It gives one the impression that there is, there could be a boundary. And, but everyone has their own boundaries, and those boundaries can be set by a routine. They can be set by whatever structure you create for yourself that makes you feel like at the end of the day, you've accomplished something, even if it's just one or two things. Everyone kind of has their own methodology. But I think, having that clear boundary to say at this time on this day, I'm going to run, I'm going to go to the grocery store. This is my time for me to do something other than these obligations and be okay with that. And just making sure that you manage those boundaries so that they are strong and steadfast and you don't blur the lines. And giving yourself the opportunity to have that little fortress for yourself.
You each put it in a very unique way. I like the idea of the fortress, not necessarily chasing perfection, and that idea of giving yourself grace, I think, is really helpful to just, even when times when it's feeling overwhelming, just give yourself grace. Order pizza. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Kind of speaking about this, these could be like tiny realizations that we ourselves like integrate in our work, but I'm curious, we had a question submitted about how we can leverage the power to make change. So it's how can we leverage the power to make change in this new reality in support of a new norm, one that recognizes a woman's role in the workforce, but also her role at home. So it's sort of like seizing this moment of so many changes all at once to kind of make a positive impact for women. So I'd love to start with Ayana with your work with progress. I'm curious your thoughts on what this could look like.
So seizing the moment to make change. I think there's been a lot of, at least in the space about, a lot of space about culture and environment that has excluded women in the first place. And so I believe that at this time, not only are there initiatives, but there's actually actions and policies to address this culture and environment, in which will not only create a space in which women and those who identify as women, but really equip a space in which everyone is able to thrive. And so I think the narration is not only looking at how do we center these efforts on women as leaders, but really how do we change their environment itself so that way it's a culture and one that doesn't exclude women in the first place, doesn't exclude individuals in the first place. And so I think in the current climate in which we are working and living and navigating it has actually afforded us these spaces to have not only dialogue, but ask leaders to commit to actions and hold them accountable. And I think it's allowing us to actually bridge these actions because of the fact that we're in these various formats, and that is allowing us to see, be a part of the process, if not leading the process itself. So, because in the past, I think, even present too, I mean, let's be realistic, but there's leaders who are in denial, and therefore that is the reason why these environments aren't currently really fully to its full potential existing. And so I think now that there's opportunities to do so, there's drive to do so, there's people leading to hold everyone accountable in doing so, and acknowledging their role and creating these spaces in which that cultural environment that was more exclusionary is definitely more inclusionary or more inclusive. I'm trying to rhyme with my words, but
And I would just add to that I think one of the things that we have learned, specifically within our team, is that change is ever evolving. There's no day that goes by without some kind of change or evolution to whether it's a particular process or a protocol or just things that we do. There's always something different or something new we can explore instead of being mired in, well, this is how we've always done it. That's no longer a term that we want to hear anymore, because there's always something new or different to explore. And I think now more than ever, as we look to have a more diverse and equitable and inclusive community, the perspectives and just the smart people that will help to drive that change for the better. And really, we have the opportunity to set an example and be role models in that respect. And I think we definitely, have a lot of opportunities, as well as being on the forefront of some of that, and really to help shape future problem solving in a way that will really be very meaningful in the future.
So completely agreed. I support dialogue. So what I'm going to say next, I don't want it to sound like I don't support dialogue, because these conversations are incredibly important to happen. But I also think some action is good. And I think that I think that when you see an opportunity to bring forth a new idea, to, Shirley Chisholm had this amazing quote about, if there's not a seat for you at the table, you pull up a folding chair. Then pull up some folding chairs for others around you. I think that you can get away with that kind of stuff more often when there is change and there are times that things are evolving. And if you can put yourself in a position where you're like, guess what? I have an idea too. I'm coming to this table right now. And pretty soon people will just be like, oh, you're at the table. That's great. Good. Bring us your ideas. Good ideas can come from anywhere. And so the dialogue about what's happening now is crucial. But I think you also should not wait for permission from somebody to bring forth your ideas. I think we need to do a better job of just raising our hands and saying we have something to say, and kind of taking those small actions every day, will actually do quite a bit as well. So that's not against dialogue. That's just take those actions, move forward, take the steps forward where you can and where you feel comfortable, I think is what I would add to that from my personal opinion.
Yeah, thank you for your responses. I think that sense of seizing the moment to act yourself, either to make a place for yourself, but not forgetting that you also must pay it forward and help others around you, rather than just sort of getting comfortable and thinking, oh, everything's fixed, I'm at the table. So yeah, I think action and dialogue need to happen together, but emphasis on action sometimes, right? Let's see. So I just wanted to say a note, as we're talking, your attendees, you're welcome to put questions in the chat. We'll save them for the live Q&A. We have about 10 minutes before we transition to that. So feel free to throw your thoughts in as we speak. I wanted to kind of touch on the second half of our theme, which is the idea of leading through change. So I'm curious if you could share sort of like either an example that in your work, or a piece of advice. What can we do like in this moment to practice leading through change? I thought maybe Melanie, we could start with you.
Sure. So I think, what comes to my mind, just first and foremost is, when we experienced a very significant change earlier this year. And I think one of the things that we learned was you can plan and plan and plan all day. And then, something will happen quite suddenly where you have to pivot and you have to make that change, because you really don't have a choice. And it's how you choose to react to that, and really be a role model for members on your team to demonstrate how you would react to that. And I think we've been able to do that earlier this year. There's been many members of leadership that demonstrated reacting and pivoting to changes in a way that demonstrated calm and demonstrated great leadership and demonstrated very clear direction, which I think it matters, because there's a lot of people looking for that. And so I think being able to pivot to those changes calmly, and also be able to let people know that, look, this is something that is unprecedented. We're going to learn together. It is, we can't be perfect. We're not going to get it perfect, but no one is. And so we're going to do the best we can with the information that we have, and we're going to do it together, and we're going to help each other out. And so I think that really demonstrated a coming together earlier this year, and really how we all pivoted together in a way that helped us manage the change as best as we could. And I think we were able to do that.
And just a note, Melanie, you are absolutely an example of one of those leaders who has led so clearly and strongly through what has been almost like whiplash of so many changes all at once. So thank you for your leadership.
Well, and I think of others in that regard too. So there's a few other female and male leaders that really are very inspiring and who I look up to, and I think they know who they are.
Any other examples that anyone wants to share about that, like what it means to you to lead through change?
I might do the second part, the advice part. And I guess I'm thinking about that advice as something that was common in some of the leading through change. And I would say advocate for others. That this is your real opportunity to do that, to build your team, maybe build a team around you of people whose voices haven't been heard or that you're reaching out to, because when change is happening, anything is possible. So I would say that if you are in a position of leading through change, that you take that opportunity to advocate for others and then work together, right? Work together to affect the change that you want to see, right? That you want to be.
And, I'm going to echo a lot of what Melanie and Rebecca have already stated, but being nimble is very, very important, right? Understanding that there really isn't a best practice in times of change. So do share what you do know. So being transparent on what you know, make the time for people to ask questions, but have a plan in place, but understand that plan might pivot as stated. And most importantly, don't try to tackle everything at once, because then you'll never get anything done. And I think in any plan, that's why you set out priorities, because you won't get anything really accomplished if you say, we are going to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to be done in 60 hours of 24-hour day. That's never going to happen. So remember to be nimble, have a plan, but allow it to understand that, room for growth and changes along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Those were great points to kind of take away, the idea of being nimble and being able to pivot and doing so with calm to the extent possible. So we're now going to move on. Thank you for your insights in that portion. We're going to open up the chat for live Q&A. So we have 20 minutes. So any attendees, if you have a question, I've already seen a couple come through, please ask away in the chat and we'll try to cover as many as we can with our remaining time. So our first question is, what do you do when work hours run out and the work can't get done because you're pulled into family obligations come, 5 or 6 p.m.? What do you tell your boss? So sort of how do you handle basically running out of time in your workday and hitting that family or home time around 5 or 6?
I'll take that's challenging because there's that power dynamic, right? You don't want to seem as though you are not a team player or contributing, but I would tap into really thinking about, I'm going to start honing into my negotiation hat, right? So where you're really thinking about what is the goal in terms of the duties you were assigned, how are your interests aligned, and explaining, what are the steps you are doing to get this done, and clearly outlining, here's how I'm spending my time during my sanctioned work days, right? Where do you see there's things to be flexible? What are your suggestions to the scope of work and the amount of time and how I'm delivering? What do you recommend? Because it's allowing there to be a conversation. You're not saying, I just can't do this, but you're presenting facts in terms of these are my tasks. We have the same goal in terms of executing this project or this line of work. And we have the same interests that is done well, but what are some of the strategies we can both propose that we could problem solve this together? So I would present it as not a confrontation, like, I have all this work and this limited amount of days, and what are you gonna do about it? I'm not doing this. It's more like, okay, I'm glad that you believe that I can accomplish all this, and I can, right? However, realistically, this is what I've done at this point. This is how I'm spending my time, and I'm coming across some difficulties. What do you suggest? So that's one approach I would suggest in terms of having this dialogue, but having the dialogue to begin with, right? Oftentimes your supervisor's running, balancing a lot of things as well. And so they don't even know that you might be struggling. So the first step is really setting that appointment and setting that time to have that discussion and approach it as a discussion. and role play in advance. So if you're nervous, you get some practice.
Yeah, I would agree that I think, prioritization is really key, as well as time management. And sometimes you can prioritize and manage your time, but there's only 24 hours in a day. And hopefully for a few of those hours, you're sleeping. And so I think it's one of those things where if you start to find yourself sooner rather than later, where you're starting to see over the horizon that you just might not be able to manage the workload, and you've prioritized key things, it is engaging in that dialogue with your supervisor well in advance to be able to convey, this is what I believe my priorities are. This is what I'm going to focus on. If I'm not able to complete something that is still within that priority list, and time is running out, how can I get additional support, additional help to balance that load in a way that on behalf of the collective team will still demonstrate the results that are needed to be delivered. So I think it is engaging in that dialogue, but also establishing very clear priorities and managing your time as well.
I think that having that conversation can be intimidating. It seems scary to even bring it up, but it's like if you don't start that dialogue, then you'll just continue to be operating under an uncertainty of whether you're managing and sort of balancing everything. And sort of along the lines of that same topic, we have a question asking for advice for some of us who might be managing up, and some advice for what ways we can grow without stepping on toes. I don't know who would like to take a stab at that. So that's looking at advice for folks who might be in the situation where they're managing up, and how can they grow without stepping on toes.
So I think this is a really delicate political situation that I think that many of us, I mean, I connect to this question. I will say that some of the strategies that have worked for me often relate to finding bridges that you can build in other places kind of around. So maybe you're struggling with relationships for people who are sort of like directly above you in terms of how do I go about growing without stepping on the toes of the people above you in the reporting structure. But I often found there's a lot of horizontal bridges, or even kind of diagonal lines of relationships that you can build, be it conversations you're having, collaborations, maybe there's a project where you are engaging with people at the levels that you're thinking about, but not doing it necessarily in direct conflict with the person that you're directly reporting to, for example. And I'm not suggesting doing this kind of stuff in secret, so it's not like you're trying to hide things, but I often think that there are opportunities to grow if we look outside of what's just immediately around us. Some of the biggest opportunities that I've had at Carnegie Mellon and in my career have come from people not in the statistics and data science department, or even in my college, which is Dietrich College. Like, it has been through connections with other colleges, with Central, and they were just, conversations that I started having, phone calls that I took, people I just cold reached out to with ideas. But in that case, you're kind of growing your footprint and moving in the direction you might want to do it, but not necessarily against something that the structure that's already been put in place. And as much as you can do that, given the bandwidth that you have, because of course you have your own work, that to me has been a very helpful strategy, to purposely try to build those diagonal lines and maybe horizontal lines, but in not just my local neighborhood, like outside of that. And I've gotten a lot of opportunities to do interesting things that did not occur to me 5 years ago, right? But that I'm doing now because of those kinds of sideways and diagonal conversations. So, and then I'm happy to, whoever this is, I know it's an anonymous person, I'm happy to talk about that. This is something that resonates quite strongly with me. So I'm happy to have that conversation. If you want more details in confidence, maybe outside of the panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was I loved how you framed that. I think that's a really interesting way to think about what definitely is a delicate and maybe uncomfortable situation to be in. We just had a nice comment, it's not a question, but an attendee shared their perspective, going back to that theme of sort of staying refreshed at home and that work-life balance. They just pointed out that when this first started, that they weren't taking any breaks. And so they just started inserting that a 10-minute walk around the neighborhood and bump the lunch hour down to a half hour so you can accommodate that. And it really helped. And just the point that we should not forget to keep doing this once we go back to the office, that these breaks.
Can I respond to that really quickly?
Yeah.
That is so true. And I totally blame Zoom life. And here's why. I realized this. When I was on campus and I had back-to-back meetings, there was always time built in to walk to someplace, right? Or to go somewhere. So there was always this break. And now it's like, you just click Zoom links. And it occurred to me a few months into this, you're not building in any breaks at all that you would have naturally had, right? If you were like walking across the quad or something, or if you were walking to another office. And somebody's, I can't remember who it was. It may have been Amy Burkert's assistant was reaching, or whoever was scheduling her was reaching out to me and giving me 45-minute blocks, purposely keeping the 15 minutes open. And I was like, it's so simple, yet so brilliant. Like, why am I not doing that? Because I got so used to just sitting here. So I could not agree more with that. I just wanted to say I had that epiphany a few months ago that Zoom is keeping us chained to the chair. And so, yes, totally agree.
I would just comment on that just to share some of my own experience. So in the last couple of weeks, I've had to return to the office for on-site activities. And just as we had to adapt to a remote environment, adapting back into the office environment was definitely an adjustment too. I mean, after the first couple of days, I was tired. I thought, oh my gosh, why am I so exhausted? But it was like, I've had to get up and move and go from one building to another or drive and, making sure that I don't forget my CMUID when I come to the office. And so there's almost a reorientation back into the office as well, as we, continue to demonstrate how we are ever adapting into this ever changing times. So.
I definitely have to remind myself that I am in charge of my schedule and I could schedule in those little breaks. Like sometimes I was feeling guilty that I needed to refill my giant water. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. You never would hopefully not feel that way, in the office to step away for a second. So I definitely need to do more neighborhood walks for sure. Our next question is sort of along the lines of career advice. So I'd love for each of you to take this because it's asking what advice you would offer to someone who's looking to follow in your footsteps as a good starting point.
I would definitely say your network internally and externally, right? And I remember when I would attend sessions earlier in my career and you had to attend networking events. And I was like, I'm just here for the food and the wine. I don't even bring cards with me. I'm like, I'll just email you later. I just did not really take the time to make those connections. And even now it's, follow up on LinkedIn and my profile. Maybe I shouldn't be giving this advice, but I don't know. My profile isn't as robust as it should be. But I would say that my networks, the community I've built that may have nothing to do with my job per se, has been a huge wealth of support and strength and opportunities to learn and grow and develop. Engaging in volunteer leadership opportunities where externally gave me that presence and ability to lead and drive change, right? And also thinking about my goals. You go or attend coaches and everyone's like, what's your goal? What's your career goal? And you might say, oh no, making sure I don't get fired. I don't know. Or getting through the next day. But you don't really step back and really think about that because you're so busy and inundated with just getting the job that you currently sit and done. But I encourage you to think about, okay, what is my next career trajectory? What does that look like? What will make me thrilled about it? And then really start assessing, are there things or items or ways in which I need to strengthen to get there? And this is where your external as well internal network play a role, because maybe they know someone in that industry, maybe they know someone in that field that could provide you with that feedback and that honest, authentic lens. So, and also try things that you might not be comfortable doing. I'm talking about skills in jobs. I mean, don't ever put yourself in a uncomfortable position that's harmful, but in terms of jobs that you might stretch yourself. So stretch yourself, because that's the only way you're really, it's the only way that you really could help your growth. So those are some tips that I will pitch out there for all you listeners. I'm getting really comfortable on this mic right now. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say for anyone that has an interest or a curiosity, risk management is something that we probably are more aware of now than ever before. And so there's a lot of great opportunities to understand that, maybe more than what used to be traditionally understood. Like when people used to think about risk management, it was exclusively from maybe an insurance perspective, which that is absolutely a part of it, and we appreciate, and I have a great amount of admiration for our insurance colleagues who I consider to be friends. And I think that aside from that, just having an understanding of, maybe more of what organizational resiliency is about, and understanding what does it mean to be a resilient. I think one of the things that I have learned over time is that it's not so much a science as it is an art form. And one of the things that, if there's an interest in understanding it more or in pursuing it, I think it's really interesting that the people that really excel at this have that curiosity. They have that inquisitive mind to ask the really good questions about, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And just thinking 3 and 4 steps ahead, and being proactive about, what does that crystal, if you had the crystal ball, what does that crystal ball look like? And how would you address some of that? And I think some people find that to be really interesting, because you're able to apply a certain level of creativity, and be proactive in doing so at the same time. And so that's one of the things that could be helpful in terms of, if there's an interest in that particular field. It's just having that, almost like wearing the detective's cap, and looking to dig into getting to some answers. So that's what I would say.
Thank you both. Yeah, very, very insightful. I was sitting there listening, and I was trying to think about, my career, which has been kind of unusual in a lot of ways. And I think, like, I was thinking, like, what would my mom say if my mom were sitting here, like, watching this, like, crazy daughter of hers, like, bop around doing all kinds of stuff, thinking, like, what on earth is this about? I think the common theme that both of us would say is any mistakes that I have made, substantial mistakes that I've made that I've had to correct in my career, have been related to letting others tell me kind of who I was and what I was good at, and sort of like internalizing those kind of labels, and not even, maybe they weren't even doing it with like ill will, right? Like they were just telling me, well, this is the kind of job you should have, and this is, and this is the way this usually goes, and you this is what the path is, but it feeling wrong, and it feeling like it wasn't a good fit, but then me thinking, well, I should do that anyway. And I think it was always wrong, and I always had to course correct. And I think one of the things that has served me well, which I've been far more successful at as I have gotten older and am more confident in this. So this was really, really hard when I was younger. So let me just be totally honest about that, is not allowing anybody to tell me kind of who exactly like I am and what I'm good at, learning to kind of take advice from people who have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, but then learning to like how can I take that and frame it for what I'm thinking and like what I'm feeling? And I've made decisions that probably people would be like, that's completely the wrong decision, but it was exactly the right decision for me. And in retrospect, I'm so glad I made that decision. So I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of now at this point, and trying to help others do, in like grad students, for example, is you don't need to take the job that someone's telling you to take. You take the job that's like right for you. Do you know what I mean? If you aren't slightly scared about coming back to what Ayana was saying earlier, if you're not slightly challenged or scared by an opportunity, that's not good. You should be, right? You should be moving into a place where you're excited and challenged. And that's probably been like a common theme. The other thing I want to connect to really quickly is the external network idea. There's so much to be said for the external network. Opportunities come from all over the place. Paying attention to, people who aren't necessarily working, like for me, I have lots and lots of connections with people who aren't in statistics and data science. Because that's great, because otherwise I'd have to talk about that all day long, and that's awful. But being able to leverage those ideas and those connections into other opportunities, that's really big. And I know, and I'll say this is mostly for the women. I know this is a mixed gender audience, but I'll say this, you hear this phrase about the old boys network all the time, right? Like, and about how trying to overcome kind of that like idea of there being some male dominated network. I am here to tell you that the counterpart of that, the female network, the self-identified or female network, is strong, and it is mighty, and it may not be, getting as much press, but you tap into that and you're going to be amazed at how much women are helping other women. And I'll just give a really brief anecdote. I had a pretty serious moment somewhat recently. I won't go into super details, but it was about trying to think about what I wanted to do for my career. And I just happened to know somebody who's on a committee with me who is much higher, many higher levels than me at another university. And I thought, God, I bet she would have good advice. And I just emailed her and said, hi, do you by any chance have any time to help out like a fellow, female professor who's struggling with some job opportunities? And I thought, she's going to have no time. This is, do you know what I mean? Triple booked. And no joke, she emailed me back in 45 seconds and gave me an hour in the next 2 days, and just gave an unbelievable amount of advice, honest, talking through things. And I was like, God, this is amazing. So and that really, really helped me. So I want to encourage everybody to leverage that network. People will help more than you think. People are really invested in advocating for others and trying to help everyone grow and be who they want to be. So I just want to,
Thank you. I have like 25 new tactics between all your answers to implement like tomorrow or maybe later today. So thank you. We are actually reaching the last like moment or two of the panel, and I'd love to close maybe like a very short, each of you could share a final piece of advice on how our members can, in their day-to-day lives, not just adapt to our new reality, but be thriving, to like go that extra sort of like mile to be really succeeding and excelling. And we'll quickly answer that, and then we'll move on. And I encourage people to bring your questions to the networking session after. We have 30 more minutes where you can pick their brains and get their great responses. So Melanie, maybe we'll start with you. So a tangible takeaway, how we can not just adapt, but thrive in the new reality.
Sure. So I think one of the things that I have leaned on quite heavily, and I'm sure that many of us already do this, but I live by lists. I set very clear goals for myself every day, and I get the greatest satisfaction of writing these lists on paper with a pen, so that when that item is done, I can cross it off and I can see that I've accomplished something. And I think, having that list to be able to have, measurable and reasonable goals for yourself on a daily basis, and also sticking to a structure and a routine. I think, it's such a challenging time for many of us, and some of us may not have that opportunity to have that routine because things can be a little nutty. But I think to the best that we can, setting a routine that we can rely upon and have that structure to at least, demonstrate, at least for ourselves to be able to feel at the end of the day, I've done everything that I can, and now it's time to rest.
I'll chime in. I was just waiting for this nice, comfortable pause. Thank you. I would say, just to be really quick, adapt to the new reality. I would say create the reality for yourself. Keep your identity and who you are at the essence of everything you do. Don't feel the need to fit within the confines of the framework. Make sure, bring your authentic self to your workspace. And if you're uncomfortable in doing so, ask yourself why and what needs to happen to do so. So I would say in this new reality, it's not about adaptation, but it's about really structuring and crafting and drafting and creating a space that's great for you. And that's even beyond where we are now. That's in everything you do. It's amazing how we have put policies in place just for people to feel comfortable and be able to thrive. And you're unable to thrive if you feel the need to fit to whatever constructs are placed out there, what it means to be a leader in these spaces. Organizations grow, institutions grow, everything benefits when you're able to really feel welcome and engaged and invested, because you're definitely going to be much more creative, excited, and have joy in the work that you're doing. And with that joy comes opportunities and your ability to excel in your leadership role or to achieve that leadership role. So people learn from differences. So to believe that there's one size fits all in leadership. I love panels and people talk about leadership styles. But one thing I think you'll find, I hope you find, is that there's so many different ways in how people perceive leadership and ways to go about doing so. So, create your own space, right? And bring others in and look around your space and think about, are you bringing in multiple voices and multiple perspectives? Because you could learn from those regardless of the title. So don't lean on titles as those that you identify as leaders. Think of the content and what they're bringing to the table, so the actions that they do, because oftentimes titles do not correlate with excellent leadership. Okay, so that's one thing I would throw out there.
So Ayana hit on a lot of things that I would say as well. So I'll just close in brief so we can get to the network thing. Change is always possible. Always, always, always. Change is always happening. Change is always possible. May take a long time, but it's always possible. Honestly, this is what I do to kind of get through this craziness. I choose fun. I choose to laugh. I choose to look at kind of the humor in the situation. I choose to lean on friends. I choose to try to look at different perspectives and different ideas and not take everything maybe so seriously all the time. Choose to look for the positive in the situation. And just choose to look for new exciting projects. That's how you move forward. Yeah. So it's more a choice, right? Like I actively choose my own choices, right? I'm choosing my life. I'm choosing my decisions, and I want to bring in as many people as I can kind of along that journey. So again, yeah. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you, panelists, Ayana, Melanie, Rebecca. You had tremendous perspectives and insights, and I really appreciate it. Building off of what Rebecca said, please choose fun. I hope that you will join us in our networking session, which is starting now. So I invite you to either take a screenshot or copy this information down. This is a new Zoom meeting so that we can utilize the breakout room feature. So what you'll do is, enter the Zoom information, join the event. Our CMWA board will be there to help get you situated into a Zoom breakout room. And I invite you to get up, stretch, grab a beverage if you need to, and we will see you in the next Zoom meeting that will start very shortly. If you enjoyed this session, I invite you to become a CMWA member. We have several events coming up within the next month, and we will be sending a follow-up message with more information. So thank you for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in the next Zoom. Take care. Thanks, everyone.